Have you ever caught yourself lost in your own thoughts, so tangled in inner chatter that you barely notice what's happening around you? It's almost as if a hidden force is scripting your every emotion, your every fear, and even your hopes without any real say from the deeper part of who you are. Some people believe this constant flood of thoughts is harmless, simply part of being human. Others insist it's our biggest obstacle, preventing us from truly experiencing life. Today, we're diving into the controversial realm of the quiet mind, exploring the startling power of emptiness, and uncovering why many spiritual teachers and some modern psychologists say that most of what we think we know might just be illusions. By the end, you might find yourself asking, is the mind helping me, or is it quietly holding me back? The grand illusion of mind. Many ancient teachings, and even some cutting-edge neuroscience, claim that the mind we identify with isn't exactly who we are. Yes, the mind can be a dazzling marvel. It plans, calculates, and imagines. It's responsible for technological breakthroughs and the creation of incredible art. Yet there's a growing debate over whether the same mind is also the architect of our deepest anxieties. Some go so far as to say that the mind is a master of deception, creating stories about our self-worth, relationships, and purpose that are only partially true, if not completely fabricated. What makes this conversation tricky is that the mind feels personal. After all, we each experience our thoughts as if they belong exclusively to us. But look closely. How often does your mind recycle memories, regrets, or daydreams about the future? Critics of mind quieting, or no mind, practices argue that trying to shut off or silence these thoughts is unrealistic and might be downright futile. They question whether the quest for emptiness is just a cleverly packaged form of escapism. On the flip side, proponents highlight that when the mind settles, life naturally becomes more vibrant. Imagine watching a river with turbulent waves. It's nearly impossible to see the riverbed. But if the water calms, the bottom of the river becomes clear. This clarity, they say, is what emerges when we glimpse beyond the restless mind. It's not about forcing quiet. It's about seeing that another dimension of awareness exists beneath the constant chatter. Some even describe the mind as an artificial intelligence that we accidentally feed with negative input. The more you worry about status, success, or relationships, the stronger these anxieties become. The real shocker? Many spiritual teachers claim you don't actually have to do much to free yourself. Simply notice the mind at work. By recognizing these mental stories as passing clouds in an endless sky, you step closer to an unshakable sense of self that doesn't depend on fleeting thoughts at all. And yet, if it were that easy, wouldn't everyone have done it by now? This tension, between seeing the mind as essential for day-to-day life and viewing it as a barrier to deeper truth, sets the stage for our next revelation. Overthinking and its unexpected consequences. We often hear that overthinking is just a nasty habit or a personality quirk. But what if this habit comes with consequences we never even suspected? Many experts in holistic medicine point out that stress stemming from constant overanalysis can lead to everything from stomach issues to recurring headaches. Chronic anxiety can trigger physical ailments because the body and mind are more intertwined than we once believed. A surprising twist here is how some critics push back against simplistic, quiet the mind, advice. They argue that mental health is more complex. If you're grappling with trauma, for instance, ignoring or suppressing thoughts could have damaging effects. This has sparked ongoing debates between traditional psychotherapy, which values talking through problems, and certain spiritual viewpoints that suggest it's possible to simply watch your thoughts drift away without labeling them as problems in the first place. Interestingly, modern technology has added more layers to this complexity. Social media, 24-hour news cycles, and smartphone notifications keep the mind perpetually stimulated. We jump from one piece of data to the next, rarely allowing ourselves a moment of genuine stillness. In fact, scientific studies have shown that a barrage of notifications can alter our brain's chemistry, making us crave more stimuli, more scrolling, and more thinking. Here's the real bombshell. This kind of mental overload actually rewires our perception of who we are. Some individuals latch onto external validation, likes, comments, or messages, as a sign of personal worth. Others fall into a downward spiral of negativity when online interactions don't go as planned. Either way, the mind is hijacked, and we become unwitting passengers on a runaway train of thought. Yet in spiritual circles, there's a long-standing emphasis on witnessing, or observing, the mind. This doesn't mean ignoring psychological care. Rather, it's an invitation to see your thoughts as events happening within you, like clouds passing in the sky, rather than declarations of absolute truth. Still, critics caution that if someone is dealing with severe mental health challenges, telling him, "Just observe your thoughts," can sound dismissive. These controversies fuel passionate arguments, making the entire topic both relevant and deeply polarizing. The mysteries of emptiness. If the mind is so noisy, what does true emptiness even look like? For many, the word emptiness conjures up images of a barren desert or a desolate landscape. But in philosophical and spiritual traditions, especially those rooted in Eastern teachings, emptiness is not the absence of experience. Instead, it's a gateway to infinite possibility. Imagine an empty canvas. Rather than being worthless, it's a space where every painting could emerge. This metaphor captures the essence of emptiness in spiritual terms. A state unburdened by preconceived notions or accumulated beliefs. In that emptiness, anything can arise: creativity, clarity, even a profound sense of connection that might feel shocking if you're used to your mind telling you you're separate from everything else. However, some spiritual teachers have faced backlash. They encourage extreme, mind-killing techniques that, according to detractors, can lead followers to repress normal human emotions. Speculations swirl about individuals who join these extreme emptiness groups and end up losing touch with everyday reality, neglecting relationships, jobs, or even basic self-care because they believe the mind is an obstacle to be destroyed at all costs. Those defending such methods say that critics misunderstand. It's not about annihilating the mind, but rather seeing through it. When you see the mind as a tool instead of your master, they explain, you're free to use it or put it aside as needed. This approach, they say, reveals that emptiness is not nothingness. It's a dynamic field of awareness that allows life to flow without constant interruption by mental commentary. This viewpoint can be difficult to swallow in cultures that value non-stop productivity. Staring out a window or sitting still can be labeled lazy or unproductive. Yet advocates of these practices promise that cultivating emptiness unlocks a hidden reservoir of insight far beyond what the analytical mind can muster. If that's true, then emptiness might be one of the most misunderstood forces of our time. Breaking the chains of the past. We all carry baggage, old stories, regrets, resentments, that weigh us down. Often, these narratives loop in the back of our minds, influencing everything from our relationships to our career choices. But what if those narratives are only as real as the energy we give them? Some mystical traditions teach that the past literally ceases to exist the moment it's over. It lives on only in our minds. Yet, if this is the case, why do we struggle to let go? The answer might lie in the human need for identity. We define ourselves by our experiences, good or bad, and letting go can feel like erasing the very foundation of who we think we are. Critics point out that "just let go" can be a naive approach, especially for individuals dealing with deep-seated trauma. They argue that while emptiness might be liberating, it can also be terrifying if it undermines a person's sense of self. To complicate matters, there are rumors of certain spiritual communities where the concept of "you have no past" is used to justify ignoring personal responsibility or accountability. Controversies arise when people who might have faced serious allegations, like manipulative behavior or other troubling claims, shrug them off as irrelevant because it's all in the mind. Such cases raise ethical questions. Is emptiness a spiritual truth or a potential tool for evading consequences? Regardless of these disputes, a more moderate viewpoint remains. You don't have to deny the past, but you also don't have to live in it. The key is to recognize its influence while discovering a deeper layer of awareness untouched by regrets and resentments. In practical terms, that might mean allowing painful memories to surface but not clinging to them as the definitive statements of who you are. It's a delicate balance, but one many say is essential to truly breaking free from mental enslavement. The surprising power of no mind. By now, you might be wondering if no mind is an all-or-nothing affair. Are we supposed to walk around with a blank slate all day? That doesn't sound particularly appealing, or even possible. The phrase can be misleading. In reality, no mind often means no unnecessary mental chatter. You still think when you need to, you just don't spin endless mental stories about everything. There are startling accounts from people who claim that in a single moment of silent realization, they felt their sense of separateness dissolve. They describe it like waking from a dream, where life becomes indescribably clear and simple. Some say that all their worries vanished, replaced by an effortless joy or contentment that isn't tied to whether things go right or wrong. But skeptics are quick to respond. How long can that last? They dismiss these accounts as temporary highs that fade once reality comes calling, like when rent is due or relationship conflicts arise. What makes this even more polarizing is that some devotees of these practices believe they've found a shortcut to enlightenment, bypassing years of therapy or self-help with one massive epiphany. Critics cry foul, calling these stories exaggerated or cult-like. They argue that any approach promising instant nirvana is either naive or manipulative, preying on people's desire for a quick fix. Still, many practitioners insist it's neither about quick fixes nor about ignoring real-world responsibilities. The essence of no mind, they say, is living from a place of spontaneous awareness, where action isn't driven by obsessive overthinking but by a clear, moment-to-moment presence. This presence can make you more effective, not less, because you're fully available to respond without carrying a backlog of judgment or fear. It's ironic, a concept that sounds vague, be empty, turns out to be one of the most practical, if approached with balance and genuine insight. Awareness beyond the ego. A fundamental question arises here. If we aren't the sum total of our thoughts, then who, or what, are we? Many traditions teach that beyond the mind's incessant ramblings lies a vast field of pure consciousness, sometimes called the self or simply, I am. This self, they say, is untouched by the dramas that swirl around in our everyday lives. Fear, jealousy, and regret might appear, but they are like ripples on the surface of a deep ocean. Yet controversies abound. Certain modern spiritual movements are led by gurus who promise their followers total freedom from suffering. It sounds enticing. Who wouldn't want to be free from the shackles of fear and sorrow? But critics warn that such promises can be a form of manipulation, especially if these leaders demand high fees, rigid obedience, or questionable loyalty. Accusations surfaced against some groups, claiming they exploited vulnerable people's yearning for inner peace. Still, for every scandalous story, there are also countless testimonials of individuals who genuinely discovered a calmer, more resilient perspective by recognizing that their essence is bigger than their mind. They often describe a sense of unity with life. The boundaries between you and the world become less defined, revealing an interconnected wholeness. They see that competition, envy, and fear are fueled by the ego's need to protect itself. Once the ego is seen through, those negative emotions begin to fade. An intriguing twist is that psychologists are increasingly studying the effects of practices like mindfulness and self-inquiry. While they aren't always comfortable with labels like spiritual, they acknowledge that a shift in identity, from ego to a more expansive sense of self, can alleviate stress and depression. It's as if modern science and ancient wisdom are converging on a single insight. Maybe we aren't who we think we are, after all. Making emptiness practical. Here's where theory meets reality. Even if emptiness, no mind, and pure awareness sound fascinating, how do they help someone juggling bills, raising children, or facing challenging relationships? Critics often argue that these lofty ideas encourage escapism, prompting people to sit around meditating while life demands action. Advocates counter this view by pointing out that a quiet mind doesn't mean passivity. Instead, it's about responding to life's events without dragging past regrets or future anxieties into the picture. It's like clearing your workspace before starting a task. No clutter means you can focus and move more efficiently. In day-to-day terms, this might look like pausing for a moment of silence before reacting to a stressful situation, or intentionally breathing calmly during heated arguments. But let's address the elephant in the room. Some folks fear that if they become too empty, they'll lose motivation. After all, isn't ambition fueled by desire, a form of thinking? The nuance here is that emptiness doesn't eliminate constructive desires, it dissolves obsessive or fear-based desires. Many practitioners say they still pursue goals, sometimes more effectively, because they aren't weighed down by the constant self-doubt that comes from mental overanalysis. They describe a feeling of being in the zone, a flow state where actions become smoother and more purposeful. It's also important to acknowledge situations where professional guidance is critical. If someone struggles with deep trauma or severe anxiety, approaches like therapy, counseling, or medication might be indispensable. Even so, the ability to step back from incessant thoughts can complement traditional treatments. The biggest takeaway: emptiness isn't about dropping out of life. It's about being fully here, without the unnecessary baggage the mind loves to carry. Controversies and speculations. Even the most devoted practitioners of mind-quieting techniques admit controversies are never far behind. Some individuals become so enthralled with the promise of liberation from mental turmoil that they may overlook red flags, Whether it's in a spiritual group, a meditation retreat, or even an online coach claiming miraculous results. This environment is ripe for exploitation if people aren't discerning. Meanwhile, skeptics fiercely challenge the notion that emptiness offers the ultimate fix. They highlight cases where people attempted to ignore real problems, like relationship issues or financial struggles, under the guise of no mind. Instead of finding liberation, they ended up in deeper trouble because they hadn't addressed practical realities. It raises the question: could emptiness, if misunderstood, become just another layer of denial? Then there's the swirl of rumors about secret teachings. Some spiritual circles suggest that advanced levels of emptiness led to supernatural abilities or mystical experiences. Tales of levitation, prophecy, or instantaneous healing still circulate today, though they often remain unproven. Critics argue that such stories border on sensationalism. Advocates respond that outward miracles aren't the goal. True transformation is quiet and inward, marked by a fundamental shift in perception rather than flashy displays of power. Yet it's precisely this aura of mystery that keeps many drawn to the subject. Perhaps we're wired to seek something beyond the ordinary, a taste of infinity or an escape from mundane reality. In that sense, emptiness remains both an enigma and a promise, forever stirring debates that touch on psychology, ethics, spiritual belief, and everything in between. A deeper look at freedom. Freedom is a loaded word. We often associate it with external liberties, freedom of speech, movement, or choice. But in the context of the mind, freedom suggests liberation from mental bondage. Imagine living your life without the constant, should have, could have, would have commentary. Critics say that's impossible. Supporters say it's our birthright. This kind of freedom doesn't necessarily mean you become indifferent. Instead, you might become more compassionate because you're not preoccupied with personal baggage. When you see yourself in others, the artificial divide that fuels conflict starts to erode. Some interpret this as the root of all spiritual teachings. The realization that if the mind is quiet, you will naturally do less harm and radiate more understanding. Of course, controversies persist. People worry that seeing yourself in everyone else leads to losing personal boundaries or ignoring real dangers in the world. But those who've taken the leap often claim the opposite. Clarity can enhance self-protection, because you aren't clouded by fear or confusion. It's a type of freedom that feels both secure and open, two qualities rarely found together in ordinary experience. Final thoughts. We've ventured through the winding corridors of the mind, explored the polarizing concept of emptiness, and peeked into the ongoing debate surrounding these transformative ideas. On one side, we have those who warn against oversimplifying human psychology. On the other, fervent believers insist you can reveal a deeper reality simply by questioning the mind's authority. Whether you see emptiness as a liberating truth or just another fleeting trend, the fact remains: how you relate to your mind shapes your entire experience of life. In our fast-paced world, the promise of mental stillness can be incredibly tempting, and equally elusive. But maybe the real secret is that emptiness is not something you achieve. It's something you notice when you stop carrying the mental baggage you never truly needed in the first place. If that's the case, then the next time you're caught in an anxious spiral, you might pause, breathe, and remember that there's more to you than the echoes in your head. Here's the final question to leave you with. If your mind were quieter, if those restless thoughts loosened their grip, what possibilities might reveal themselves? Perhaps the most radical discovery of all is that the answers you seek aren't hiding in your mind's noise. They might be waiting in the stillness beneath it,